Now we should have something that looks like this. We're going to go ahead and fold this. Actually, let's fold it at the end. Never mind. So looking at this, we're looking at solving percent problems. And solving percent problems, we can do it a couple ways. We can do it as a proportion or just an equation. And I'm going to show you both, and you can choose which one you prefer. So as a proportion, you can always set up part over whole. So these are always our numbers, over whatever percentage they give you. Keep it as a percent over 100, because 100 is the whole of a percent. Now, the other way you could also do this is you can always do you can always do whole times the percent as a decimal equals part. So you can set it up one of two ways. You can use this equation or this proportion. We'll do some of both. So looking at this first one, 21 is what percent of 35? Well, whatever is by itself with the is always our part. So our problems will always be written as what percent of whole is part. So notice how the part is just always by itself on the other side of the is, and then you have percent and whole on the other side of the is. So this is kind of acts as our equal sign that separates the two sides. So 21 by itself on the is, so that's our part. So if we want to set this up as a proportion, that's 21 over our whole. Well, the whole can't be the percent, so it has to be this of 35. So 21 over 35 equals the percent, and it's saying what percent? So we don't know the percent. So that's going to be our variable over 100. Now, once we get to this, we just go through and solve like we would any other proportion. So the hardest part with these percentages is just setting it up. So now we're going to go through and cross multiply. So 21 times 100, you're going to get 2100 equals 35x. And then just divide by 35 on both sides. So 2100 divided by 35, and we get 60. So x equals 60. Now the nice thing about using proportions is it's already in a percent for you. So your answer is just 60%. You don't have to convert it from a decimal. So that's your answer, 60%. 21 is 60% of 35. Now let's look at this next example. Let's try it with the equation this time. So our equation tells us whole times decimal, or whole times the percent equals part. So 28 is, so again that is separates it. So the 28 is by itself on the other side of the is, so that's our part. So, and we don't know the percent. So I'm going to say x times our whole, 50. I switched percent and whole, and that's fine. Remember, it doesn't matter what order we multiply, equals our part, 28. And then we just go through and solve like a one-step equation. So you know x times 50, to get rid of that, you're going to divide by 50. X equals 28 divided by 50, whatever that is. And now with this one, we end up getting a decimal. So we do have to convert it to a percent. So once we get this, 56 hundredths, move the decimal twice, and we know the answer ends up being 56%. So you can choose whichever way you want to do it. I'll do a couple more examples, one of each, the proportion and the equation. I tend to like the equation method a little bit better, but the proportion works just as well if you like that. So let's look at example 3. And let's try that with a proportion again. So what is, remember that is separates it, 12% of 175. So remember the percentage and the whole are always together, kind of separated by that of. So we don't know the part. What? We don't know. So x is our part over the whole. Our whole is 175 equals, and then we have the percent. The percentage is 12 over 100. So now we're just going to cross multiply. So 100 times x, we get 100x equals 175 times 12. When we do that, 175 times 12, we can use it. Always use a calculator with these. We get 2100, and then just divide by 100 on both sides. So we get x equals 21. And that's our answer, 21. So 21 is 12% of 175. Now let's look at this next one over here. Let's go back to using the equation. So 9 is, remember, is separates it all. So is our part. So it's going to be by itself on the equal sign. So 9 is means equal. 45% as a decimal, so 45 hundredths. Of is kind of like times. So I'm going to write that too. Of is always like our multiplication. Whenever you see of, that means multiplication with percent problems. So 45% times what number? We don't know what number. So we're going to put x. And then just go through solving this. 45 hundredths times x to get rid of it, divide. And then we go through and do that. 9 divided by 45 hundredths, we get 20 when we do that on the calculator. So x equals 20. So that's telling us 9 is 45% of 20. And that makes sense. 45% is close to half, 50%, and 9 is close to half of 20. You always want to kind of check if your answer just sounds reasonable when you do these problems. What I want you to do, go ahead and look at example 4 and example 6 here. See if you can set this up and solve it from there. Either use a proportion or use the equation. So we have this equation. Remember, that will kind of help you. You know, of is multiplication and is equal sign. Or you can use the proportion. So go ahead and try 4 and 6 if you think you're ready. So now looking at 4 and 6, let's do this first one with an equation. So the first thing we have is what? We don't know what it is, so we're just going to use a variable. I'll use a different one this time. I'll use w. And then we have is. Remember, is like our equal sign. So equals 90% as a decimal would be 90 hundredths, or just 9/10 of. Remember, of is multiplication. So times 130. So everything in these sentences has an operation. You have our numbers. If you don't know the number, it's a variable. Is translates to equal, and of translates to times. That's why I like these equations. They're a little bit simpler once you get the hang of it. So now just go from there. So we get W equals whatever 9/10 times 130 is. When we do that, we end up getting 117. So that tells us 117 is 90% of 130. All right, and then looking at the last one here, let's do this one as a proportion. So 91, that's by itself on the is, so that's our part. So when we use our fraction here, it's going to be part 91 over the whole. We'll come back to that because we haven't gotten there. So, and then 70%, that's our percent over 100. And then since of what number, we don't know the whole. So we're just going to go ahead and make that our variable. I'll go back to x again. You can use whatever variable you want. Then just go through cross multiply. So 91 times 100 is 9100 equals 70 times x, 70x. And then you're just going to divide by 70. And then when you do that on the calculator, we end up getting 130. So 130 is our answer. So that tells us 91 is 70% of 130. And that makes sense because 130 is larger and we want a larger number. We know 91 is only 70% of it. So when it makes sense if 91 is 70% of a number smaller than 91. So always try to check how reasonable your answer is before you keep going. All right, so we have this. Now what you're going to do is go ahead and fold this bottom up to the line. And I'll get something that looks like this. And then fold that. So you have an example for when you have to find the percent given the part and the whole, finding the part when you give the percent and the whole, and finding the whole given the part and the percent. The 3 types of percent problems you'll have. You have 2 examples for each, and you have 1 of each type, either proportion and the equation way to do it. And then you're just going to go ahead and cut along the dotted lines. You'll probably have to glue this into your notebook sideways, but just go ahead and glue it in sideways. Label in your table of contents as percent for solving percent problems or percent of a number. And you can always reference this when we go through and practice these and studying and all that. All right, thank you.